Every flight begins with a fall by SilentTeyz. Chapter 2 Abduction. Summary. Techno has an axe in his hand, which on its own is a very, very bad sign. And there is a stump on the ground, too, a flat surface, a perfect chopping block to slaughter a chicken on. The problem is, Techno doesn't have chickens. Chicken is a bird, however, and so is Tommy at the moment. They are going to fucking decapitate him. Tommy never got to formally meet Phil before the Dream Dsmp. He didn't even know whose trash he was stealing from until Wilbur had first caught him, climbed halfway into the trash can, and a rotten apple clenched in his teeth. They stared at each other for a long moment, dark brown eyes widening as they met the stare of narrowed blue ones. Until Tommy screeched at the top of his lungs, flipped him off, and bolted for the forest with the speed of a rabid raccoon. Now, Tommy doesn't have a single idea of what in that 3-second encounter could have possibly indicated him as suitable for adoption. Not like a normal adoption, but this wild thing is now my brother type of adoption. Because Wilbur was a teenager himself at the time, but that's basically what happened in the months following the incident. Will didn't even have to try hard. Just leave food for him on a plate outside, and Tommy, reluctant about returning to the house at first, started showing up every other day. Simple snacks turned into 3-time meals, toys, and even books. After he was caught, after he was taught how to read, and eventually, Tommy practically spent all his time near Wilbur. "Admit it," Wilbur once said. "You keep coming back because you like my company." "Don't flatter yourself," Tommy snarled back. "I like food, and you're just dumb enough to give it away for free." Wilbur reached to scratch at the boy's head, and latter's eyes tried, and failed, to flare aggressively when he inevitably melted into a puddle under the gentle soothing touch. "I hate you," Tommy deadpanned. Wilbur raised a brow at Tommy, snuggling by his side, face buried deeply into the soft yellow wool of his sweater. "Uh-oh." The corners of his lips tugged into a smile. "Of course you do." "Fuck you." Phil probably knew of Tommy's existence, but only from his son's words, as the boy avoided their house whenever the avian was home. Massive black wings, as if woven from the darkness of the void itself, filled him both with awe and dread. Tommy still remembers his own surprise when he learned that Philza Minecraft, the legendary avian, one of the oldest players the universe had ever known, famous for spending years in hardcore servers, where the smallest mistake could send you into a permanent oblivion, was Wilbur's father. Even more, he was stunned by the fact how casually his friend had talked about him. Wilbur mentioned Phil constantly, in every memory he shared, about things as simple as learning to ride a bike or shoot a bow, or about a picnic they went on together when he was younger. Tommy, who never knew his own parents, if there were any to begin with, absorbed these stories with a great greed. A father, he had learned, is someone you can always rely on. A father, Wilbur had told him, is the one who will support and love you no matter what happens. In Tommy's head, Phil turned into a certain image of a winged warrior, merciless embodiment of justice, but also of a gentle and caring man you could turn to in a time of need. And all the more it shocked him when he watched the avian put a sword through Wilbur's heart. A few days later, Phil showed up at Tommy's doorstep, carrying a pile of the boy's items he lost during the battle with Technoblade and his withers. Tommy didn't see the deeply guilty expression on Phil's face, nor the way his wings fell sorrowfully. Instead, all he could concentrate on was Wilbur's sword resting against the avian's hip, and blood. A hallucination caused by the lack of sleep and rest. staining his hands. Tommy's knees give up on him in an instant. Weapons and armor clattered to the ground as Phil dropped them to catch him and embrace the boy in a tight hug, rubbing circles into his back as he sobbed. It was pathetic and humiliating, and Tommy hates himself for that moment of weakness. But he craved comfort at the time, and even the murderer of his brother wasn't enough to overcome the blind adoration he developed towards Phil. They never talked about Wilbur's death after that, though the endless sadness and feeling of emptiness shared one for both Tommy and Phil build a certain understanding in their relationship. It grew into something more personal and close with time. First, when they rebuilt L'Manberg together, and later, when he and Techno rescued the avian from under the house arrest. And maybe that was the reason it hurt so much to see Phil standing across the doomsday battlefield, disappointment and disdain in his eyes. In the end, Tommy doesn't know what he expected. He is just a random kid Wilbur once claimed as his brother. And Technoblade is Phil's longtime friend, so by betraying Techno, he had turned the avian's anger towards himself. Phil's a scary man when he wants to be, and Tommy's head pounds with danger, 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 all the way to the nether portal, because apparently that's the place the avian takes him to. Purple particles dance in front of his vision, and suffocating warmth envelops Tommy's. Two factors that instantly make him feel sick. He closes his eyes and steadies his own breath to try and lessen the nausea. "I'm sorry for this," the avian says, noticing his struggles. "My home's too far to walk there on foot." Tommy regrets his stomach is empty. He would have loved to puke all over Phil's hands. "Fuck you," he says, and for what he feels like the hundredth time this day, he regrets humans can't understand him. He notices how the portal flares a few times behind Phil, and a few crows fly through the circle above the avian's head. There are certainly less of them here than there were in the overworld, and Tommy suspects that normal crows don't like interdimensional travel either. As far as he can tell, Phil and his chat aren't going to murder him anytime soon. They've got too much chances for that already, and on top of that, the avian could have just tossed him into lava if he felt like it. Staring at the burning mix of magma and molten rocks burns Tommy's eyes and brings up unpleasant memories, so he decides on pressing his head into Phil's hand instead. It doesn't take a genius to understand where they are going now. Phil said home himself, and Tommy hears cobblestone clatter quietly under the avian's feet. He built that path himself, and knows that it leads to the Arctic Commune's nether portal. It's an unpromising conclusion at best, and a terrifying one at worst. Tommy still suspects Phil somehow knows about the respawn glitch. Why would he pick him up otherwise? And all of this is just a prolonged execution, and Techno is already waiting for them on the other side of the portal. Sure, Techno hadn't killed him the one time he stole shit from him for his confrontation with Dream, but maybe it was because he thought Tommy was a goner anyway. And the fact that he survived may not sit with him all that well. Purple flashes through his closed eyelids, and freezing wind breathes into Tommy's face? Muzzle? What do birds even have? And the contrast with the burning temperatures before is overwhelming. His eyes snap open, and his head turns sharply to look around him. To the snow-covered fields and hills, to the spruce trees darkening in the distance, pointing at the blue sky sprawled above with their sharp tops. Technoblade isn't here, unless he somehow learned to hide in the snowdrifts like a fox. "Just a little longer," Phil says. He is talking to himself, yet it is Tommy who tenses. The fact that Techno isn't here doesn't mean he isn't at home now. A shiver runs down his spine, and this time he isn't sure if it's from the cold or the fear. Tommy is pressed close to Phil's chest with one hand, as with the other he unbuttons the cloak on his shoulders. As if simply holding him like a hamburger wasn't enough, the avian wraps it around him in loose layers. Fucking great, Tommy grumbles angrily from where his head peeks out of the fabric. Now I'm a crow burrito! He can't move like that at all. Even his other, healthy wing is now forced to fold firmly against his body. Tommy can't complain too much, though. The cloak is lined with fur, and he instantly feels warmer now. That there is something between his thin feathers and the crispy tundra air. This shouldn't distract him from the fact that he is still in danger. Tommy fights against the drowsiness that arises from the softness of the fabric around him and gentle sway of Phil's movements. But sleep is instantly forgotten when Techno's cabin comes into sight. A house, of all things, couldn't make Tommy panic. It's the man who stands in front of it that causes ice needles of fear to sting from his clawed feet to the tips of his wings. Techno has an axe in his hand, which on its own is a very, very bad sign. And there is a stump on the ground, too. A flat surface, a perfect chopping block to slaughter a chicken on. The problem is, Techno doesn't have chickens. Chicken is a bird, however, and so is Tommy at the moment. They're going to decapitate him. That's the perfect murder plan. No witnesses, no body, not the real one at least, and they can just throw his corpse to the real crows, and there wouldn't be anything but a skeleton of him left. People would just assume Tommy died in prison, and won't investigate it any further. Techno, Phil calls. Phil? Techno greets. How was your trip? His voice is close and louder than Tommy expects, and it is followed by the sound of the axe slamming into wood. Tommy shudders, squeezing in on himself harder and harder until he can barely breathe. Please just forget about him. Please just leave him alone. Surprisingly eventful. I found someone on my way back from the XP farm. Well, Chat did, and then brought me to him. That must be the moment Techno notices the bundle in Phil's arm. One that Tommy is desperately trying to get lost in, because he asks, "What's that?" The hold around him loosens, just enough for the fabric to slide down from Tommy's head. He is exposed to the sun and to two sets of intent gazers. Tommy only feels them. His eyes are closed again, and he is suppressing the rises and falls of his chest involuntarily. There's a crow, Tommy can imagine Techno frowning from the tone of his voice. And I'm sorry to disappoint you, Phil, but it looks dead. Wait. Tommy played dead without intending to, and it actually worked? He only stiffens further and holds his breath when Phil's finger carefully slides down from his neck to his chest and then abdomen. He'd been fine just a minute ago. Phil sounds confused and concerned. Can you perform CPR on birds? Oh, fuck. Tommy knows CPR, which is a little weird until you remember he participated in wars, and he is not going to tolerate that shit while he's conscious. His eyes snap open, and without really thinking it through, he bolts. One good lunge, and Tommy is out of the cloak like a bullet. The fact that Phil loosened the hold as well as the surprise effect gave him enough space and time to slip away. The fall is fast, and not as bone-breaking as the last time. Tommy twists his back to meet the ground as he falls, and a little sideways to ensure he doesn't land on the injured wing. Even softened with the deep snow, it hurts, and he has to press down or whine as he scrambles to his feet and runs. Tommy wouldn't make a single step if it wasn't for the pure adrenaline that kicked in at that moment. He feels like a fucking Neo when Phil's hand slides just an inch past his feathers. Tommy turns acutely and finds himself sprinting towards the stump when Techno finally catches him. "Let me go, bitch!" he screams. "Die!" He is not as gentle as Phil is. Techno just scoops him up with one hand, and he flies just by the axe, sticking halfway out of the stump, and his own dishevelled reflection flashes in the polished metal of netherite. There is a pile of firewood stacked to the side of it that Tommy didn't initially notice. "That's a very jumpy crow you have." Techno returns Tommy back to Phil. "Crow," he said, "not Tommy. They don't know he, the bird, is Tommy, do they?" "He's just very scared," Phil says. "That's a baby bird, or a fledgling to be exact. Jack didn't find his parents, nor his nest, and crows fly short distances at this age, so he might have just wandered off too far on his own." Tommy is so relieved at that moment that he doesn't even snap at Phil for calling him a baby. Can't be complaining about small details when he was just basically handed a "congratulations, you're not going to be murdered" card. If neither Phil nor Techno know the truth, then Tommy's execution is put on pause, which is a good thing, a great thing actually, since Tommy very much likes being, not dead. Tommy's racing heart calms down slowly, though he isn't sure he should be relaxing just yet. It's an injured crow that Phil decides to help, seemingly just out of the kindness of his heart. If it was Tommy, as a normal human Tommy, laying there with a broken arm, he wouldn't bat an eye. Or maybe he would stab and put him out of his misery, depending on how merciful he feels at that moment. Tommy still remembers the warning cuts on his shoulder left by Phil's sword the other day he tried to get into Techno's house in his absence. And from that arises a new issue. If Phil didn't recognize Tommy immediately on sight, there is no guarantee he won't suspect anything in the future. Tommy looks like a crow, talks like a crow, but he doesn't act or move like one at all. Who knows what Phil would do if he learned the truth? Kill him? Break his other wing? Tommy doesn't even want to think of it for too long. One thing is for sure. Phil and Techno would get angry at Tommy for tricking them, even if unintentionally, into helping him. You've never seen me as a friend, Tommy." Techno's voice rings in his ears, past the roars of the Withers. "You just used me from the very start." "Well, no. Fuck you, Techno. Tommy isn't going to argue with his own memories, nor the real Techno standing in front of him. Oh, and speaking of this, Techno, fuck you too." Techno, completely oblivious to the angry swears sent in his address, crosses his arms on his chest in response to Phil's words. "So you're taking him in then?" Techno doesn't ask, just states, sounding like a parent whose child brought a stray dog home, knowing full well that he isn't going to say no. "Don't you have enough crows as it is?" "Chat follows me around because they want to," Phil chuckles. "This little guy broke his wing, and I'm keeping him for only as long as it takes to heal." Now, that is finally some good news. Tommy perks up, raising his head and cawing slightly at Phil. There wasn't a word behind it this time, and rather just pure relief. Tommy ducks his head back down when Techno glances at him out of the corner of his eye. "If he doesn't run away from you earlier," he rumbles. "That's what I wanted to ask you," Phil nods. "Do you have a spare cage I could use?" "Not a cage," Techno says, "but a box with air holes and stuff." "That's even better. Can you bring it to me in a minute?" Techno nods, and Tommy exhales loudly when the man's broad back disappears behind the door of his cabin. Now that his life is not in immediate danger, he has the time and attention to notice that there is, in fact, a new house at the Arctic commune. It is almost identical to Techno's cabin, and is connected to it with a short spruce bridge. Phil walks across it, still holding Tommy, and enters with him into the house. First thing he notices is a portrait on the wall. Wilbur is so much younger on it than Tommy remembers, with that heavy, feverish flare to his eyes, and the tiredness evident in every little crease of his face. His brother smiles here too, a bit smugly, but genuinely, something he did so rarely in Pogtopia that the boy almost forgot what his smile even looked like. The picture hangs just above a door leading to the balcony Tommy had seen outside, so he turns away and settles on staring at Phil instead. Well, Avian says, welcome to my humble abode. Let's get you patched up now. Phil doesn't know he is actually a human, and yet still talks to him like one. Tommy finds it weird, to say the least, but it's better than listening to the sound of his own heartbeat pounding in his ears as he is laid and held on the table. Tommy is tiny. He is apparently a fledgling, whatever that means, and not an adult crow. In comparison with him, Phil is a giant, and Phil, honestly, is far from the tallest person on the server. As much as the avian seems friendly towards the random bird he found, he still could end his life just by stomping on him, or simply squeezing his neck too tightly. Tommy's head turns and twists to follow Phil's every move, as he reaches for something in a chest while still holding him firmly, and he wonders if that's what prey feels like being cornered by a predator. Phil pulls out a roll of bandages. Tommy's breath hitches at the sight of sharp scissors, but the avian only uses them to cut the fabric into thinner ribbons. The way he easily and quickly wraps them around his wing makes him think Phil has done it many times before. Well, Phil does have a personal army of crows, and maybe there is a few as unlucky as him to get their wing broken in stupid accidents. Except what happened to Tommy wasn't an accident at all. He would call it an unprovoked assault. Tommy was the one to attack first, yes, but he had a reason and a right to do so, and Jack didn't. Tommy is genuinely going to kill him once he gets out of here. He twitches with rage at the thought, frankly forgetting that Phil's still working with his injured wing, and the constant pain pounding from it that had just soothed down soars again. Tommy doesn't fight a whine that escapes his throat, and a few others that follow it too. Phil's expression softens into something Tommy can't quite decipher. He doesn't understand why it is directed at him rather than the meaning of it, because the expression itself is quite familiar. It's the way Wilbur used to look at Fundy, the way Wilbur used to look at Tommy, too, prior to Pogtopia. Like he is something precious that must be protected and taken care of. Phil purrs. It feels as though the more he makes that sound, the further it sinks into Tommy, as stupid as it is worded. Sounds can't sink in, but this one makes him relax under the touch that should be frightening in normal circumstances. It isn't, and as Phil finishes binding the bandage, Tommy understands exactly why. He missed it, being able to trust others to take care of him. Tommy doesn't trust Phil, however, even if that look on his face reminds him painfully of Wilbur. It isn't directed at him, after all, but at a poor little bird with a broken wing the avian had saved today. Tommy is not a crow. He is not a bird. He is a human stuck in a very odd and humiliating situation. Feels better, doesn't it? Phil says, finally readjusting his hold to put Tommy straight, rather leaning sideways uncomfortably. It still feels like shit, Tommy informs him. The injured wing is now folded as naturally as it could be, and, well, it's better than just letting it drag on the ground like it previously was. Tommy adds, quieter, as if Phil could even understand him. But thank you, I guess. The front door opens to reveal Techno in a large box in his hands. The harsh tundra wind that is quick to slip through is nothing in comparison with the slap Tommy feels when he recognizes the box as the one he used to hide from Dream in during his stay at Techno's house. Fuck his luck. How didn't Techno use or destroy that thing for so long? Thank you, mate, Phil says. Tommy doesn't quite hear it. He barely notices Techno and the avian picking up things from around the house and putting them in the box. Tommy stays in this dormant, dull state. Just just Phil places him inside and puts the lid on. He immediately launches at the top. Tommy tries to open it with his beak first, then his claws, and very soon ends up mindlessly slamming into it in hopes to knock it out with the sheer force. To say he doesn't like tight spaces is an understatement. He fucking despises them. And even more, Tommy is. Is there even a point to lie to himself now? Afraid of the tight spaces he was put through traumatic experiences in. The insides of the box still hold the traces of his own nails scratching at it in a panic, and even if there's more space now that Tommy himself is smaller, the holes aren't big enough for his head to fit through them. He is trapped, breathing hard in the dim darkness, with no way to escape. Recent memories of Pandora's vault send his mind into an ugly mess. Tommy calls, whines, screams, and puts every single sound he can make to use. Phil responds to him again, but no amount of purring can pull him out of this one. Aren't birds supposed to calm down in the darkness? He hears Techno ask. They are, Phil says, sounding lost, and that is a quite unusual reaction. That makes Tommy pause. He just thought about it less than 10 minutes ago, that Phil could possibly start suspecting something in the future if he doesn't behave naturally enough. Tommy is a bad actor, but he isn't going to be caught so easily in the first day spent with Phil, especially when the price for his mistake could be as high as his own life. Birds don't have claustrophobia, so Tommy forces himself to sit down in one of the corners of the box and takes a series of controlled breaths. The walls are still pressing on him. He can't get enough air no matter how much or deep he inhales, but at least from the outside, Tommy sounds like he had calmed down. This is temporary, he reminds himself. Broken bones take 2 to 3 weeks to heal, a bit less with the use of regeneration potions. Tommy hopes the birds are not that different from humans, and he will be released by the end of the month. He just has to be patient throughout these weeks, and then he will find Tubbo, return to his own normal body, and everything that happened in the prison and afterwards will be forgotten like a ridiculous nightmare. Tommy lowers his gaze and finally notices that there is a soft blanket folded on the bottom of the box. It's strangely warm, like there is something heating it up from the inside. Tommy tosses the edge of the blankets with his claws to unfold it and finds the source, a dimly shining blaze rod. That is actually nice. Tommy places the rod back down, covers it up with the blankets, shuffling around with them until he deems it comfortable, before laying down and sighing with relief as the warmth spreads from his feathers to his skin in silky waves. Tommy drifts. Okay, that's the end of chapter 2. I want to again state I do not support the half the creators and the dreams of people when things went haywire. I was hoping Wilbur wouldn't be mentioned in this fic, but yeah, as far as I know, he just gets mentioned. Shouldn't actually pop up as a character, or else he would show up in the relationship tags, I'm assuming. Hopefully. Anyway, yes, this is an interesting one. Of like, the, this poor guy is just like, I'm a crow. Why am I a crow? It's like the trauma. Yeah, my characters are not my characters. The characters in the fics that I'm reading are not getting a break. They're doomed. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed. Tell me what you thought of it in the comments. Tell me what you think is going to happen next. And I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.